Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this town hall event. My name is John Dodds, and I am the President and Chief Operating Officer of Kencor Elevator Systems, which is an American elevator group company. I'm also the chair of the NAEC Member Services Committee, and I want to take this time to welcome everyone to our second town hall discussion of 2024. The town hall series, first launched in February of 2021, now entering its fourth year, has become a series of dialogues with various leaders within the vertical transportation industry. These conversations have focused on topics that have been identified by NAEC members as important and significant ones for their businesses. With input from the Member Services Committee, the topics for the town hall sessions have been assembled from various sources, and we've attempted to cover a wide array of subject matter, focusing on the vertical transportation industry. The Member Services Committee is always looking for feedback on this series of events. So if you have any feedback in general, or if you have any ideas about topics for future town hall events, please reach out to Lori Walking, and she can be reached at lori@naec.org. Would also like to remind everyone that this event is being recorded and it can be watched along with all the previous town hall events. And it can be found on YouTube or by going to naec.org, navigating to the industry events tab, and then clicking on the town hall series. We have amassed over a dozen previous recordings in our database for on-demand viewing for individuals who are not able to attend any of the previous sessions live and in person. Before we get started with our town hall, I wanted to let you know that the upcoming United Convention will be held September 23rd through 26th in Atlantic City, New Jersey. NAEC is collaborating this year with SECA, Elevator U, and IAEC, and will be the premier gathering of elevator industry leaders and professionals. The convention will have over 200 exhibits, robust education sessions, and a host of networking opportunities. Early bird registration ends on June 28th, so register today at unitedconvention.com. For the first time ever, NAEC is excited to provide the opportunity for our members to participate in a philanthropic initiative. In honor of NAEC's 75th anniversary, we are proud to roll out United Indeed at the United Convention and Expo on Monday, September 23rd from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. We would like to thank our generous host, MEI Total Elevator Solutions, as we partner with Feed My Starving Children and assist with packing meals that will feed children all over the world. We are encouraging you to make a difference and sign up today. The link is found on the sign-up screen. For today's town hall, we are celebrating NAEC's 75th anniversary, and we have a panel of members who have received Sorry, Laura, if you can help me with that. Apologies. For today's town hall, we are celebrating NAEC's 75th anniversary, and we have a panel of members who have received NAEC's most prestigious and elite award, the William C. Sturgeon Distinguished Service Award. This award is presented annually to an individual who most merits the elevator industry's recognition, an individual who has given his or her time and energy to the benefit of NAEC and the industry. These esteemed panelists will each share their insights and advice to navigate and thrive in our industry. We would like this to be an interactive event, so please feel free to ask as many questions at any time during the event. If you have a question, please enter it in the chat box, or more preferably, if you want to click the reactions button, you can raise your hand, which is at the bottom of your screen, and we'll unmute you at the appropriate time to ask your question. As always, we try to be mindful of everyone's time. We're going to try to wrap no later than 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And now I would like to introduce our panelists. Our first panelist, who's graciously agreed to continue with his participation today, even in the spite of being a little bit under the weather. Mark Boelhouwer is the chairman at American Elevator Group and a seasoned elevator industry professional who has made a significant and lasting impact on the industry throughout his career. As the driving force behind a large number of substantial mergers and acquisitions, Mark has established himself as a strong and innovative leader. Mark served as the president of NAEC and was the 2022 recipient of the prestigious Sturgeon Award. Ricia Sturgeon-Hendrick is the editor-at-large and publisher of Elevator World. Ricia grew up with Elevator World, a 71-year-old magazine based in Mobile, Alabama, and founded by her late father, William C. Sturgeon. Ricia has served on the NAEC Safety Committee for more than 30 years and the NAEC Education and Technical Committee for 15 years. She was recognized with the William C. Sturgeon Distinguished Service Award in 2002 and became an honorary member of NAEC in 2019. Affectionately known in the industry as LJ, Louis Blaiotta began his career at Columbia Elevator in 1986, and in 1994 rose to the level of president and CEO. During his tenure, he has designed and implemented a new business structure for enhanced customer relations, production efficiency, employee relations, and the aggressive application of emerging new technologies to a very traditional field. LJ served as a board member and treasurer of NAEC and received the William C. Sturgeon Distinguished Service Award in 2020. Michael J. Ryan is Vice President of Business Development for the Peelle Company and is responsible for growing sales of new products and prospecting developing markets. He has been with Peelle since 1980 in a variety of sales and management positions. Mike is a past board member of NAEC and Exhibit Advisory Chairman. Mike's industry acknowledgments include New York's Pop Joe Golf Outing Man of the Year, NAEC's President's Award, and received the William C. Sturgeon Distinguished Service Award in 2013. It's great to see you all. Thank you for taking your time to join us today. And before we get into our panel discussion, I wanted to go to Ricia, and I wanted to invite Ricia to say a few words about her father and maybe provide some context to today's discussion around the William C. Sturgeon Distinguished Service Award.
Thank you, John. My father came into the elevator industry, excuse me, pretty much the way many of us do because of family. He came back from the war in 1944, and he had a wife and a baby, and he was intending to go back to where he came from, which was Utica, New York. But his wife's father owned a small elevator company, and it had barely survived the war. And my mother thought that my father could pull it together. And her father was not in very good health. And so he did. He had my mom and dad both worked there, and he had a copy of Annette's Elevators book and an 80-year-old mechanic that kind of helped him learn about the elevator industry. And I guess right after the war, it was just a golden age for elevators. The company came along very well, and he met other people in the elevator industry, but he felt like communications was just really terrible, and that it was hard to learn from other people because there was so much distance between you. And so he met up with a number of other people in the industry through Montgomery. He was worked with Montgomery Elevator, and as one of their distributors. And so they would get together frequently. And he thought that that was a great idea for people to get together and talk, and that they learned so much from one another. And so he encouraged the industry, or the people that he met, the men that he met in the industry, to, meet more often and to kind of make it into something regular for the industry. And that was kind of the beginning of NAEC. And it was also a time when his company, the elevator company, was in pretty good shape. And he was finally able to do what he really wanted to do, which was to write. And so he started Elevator World. And by then, the only thing he knew to write about was elevators. And so that was how Elevator World started. And that was, I guess, when he came back from the war, he was very young, probably in his mid-20s. So it was a real golden age for elevators.
Thank you, Ricia. Next, I'm going to go to LJ. LJ, given the subject matter of the day, and obviously knowing your family's long history, not only in the industry, but with NAEC, for the benefit of those who may not know, I wanted to ask you about the evolution of the award, and potentially how it compares to other awards we have at NAEC, such as the President's Award or honorary memberships, et cetera. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Okay. So thanks for having us, by the way. So I'll start with honorary membership. Honorary membership is something the association awards to recognize those individuals that have given selflessly of their time for many, many, many years. Some people even refer to it as a lifetime achievement kind of award. And it's a nice recognition to those that maybe didn't win a different award, or maybe have won awards over the years, but stayed and continue to participate in the industry for many, many, many years. And we recognize them that way. The President's Award sometimes gets conflated and confused with the William C. Sturgeon Award. The President Award is given by the president of NAEC. Usually it's annually. None of these awards are required to be given annually. They've become more of an annual award now. Being a member of the board of directors, or in particular being the president of NAEC, is a tremendous amount of responsibility. It takes a tremendous amount of time, takes a big toll on your business, takes a toll on your family life. And it's just a way that the president, his or her own discretion, makes a decision and wants to publicly recognize maybe an individual, or maybe more than one individual, that helped them get through this period as on the board, and help the president through providing moral support and business support back. It could be anything. It could be a spouse that helped you get through morally. It could be a business executive back at the office that kept everything running for you while you were running the association. It could be somebody outside the industry. It's just it's a personal award that the president gives out, and at his or her sole discretion. Now, I did copy down the notes for the Sturgeon of the Sturgeon Award. So the William C. Sturgeon Distinguished Service Award is what we're talking about today. And I let it slip, but we in our family, growing up with Bill Sturgeon and Mary Sands, his wife, and they were, you know, icons in the industry. My father and my mother, the nickname for Bill was Sturge. And we've grown up calling the award the Sturge, by the way. So it's like the Oscars for the Academy Awards. We call it the Sturge. So who won the Sturge this year? But anyway, so I did copy down the criteria because I want to be very specific about this. So you mentioned some of this, John. The William C. Sturgeon Distinguished Service Award is NAEC's most prestigious and elite award. It's presented annually. Now it's an annual award to the individual that merits the industry's recognition. And it's an individual that's given unselfishly of his or her time and energies for the benefit of the association and the industry. So we really look for a member that has spent much of their life in the benefit of the industry. Now, you've asked how it's evolved over the years. Originally, NAEC went a good 10 years before they had the first award. Originally, it was called the Man of the Year. And not surprisingly, one of the NAEC's founders, Bill Sturgeon, was the first honoree. So the first person to win the Sturge was Sturge in 1961. We went 20 years before we started realizing we could be less chauvinistic and renamed it. Instead of the Man of the Year in 1981, it became the Distinguished Service Award. Also had a lifetime achievement kind of quality to it. Then Bill Sturgeon, the only person to ever win it twice, became the honoree in 1995. And at that point, we renamed the award in his honor. And ever since then, it's been the William C. Sturgeon Award. Just a quick funny story. When it first started, it was the way they used to present the award was there was an old TV show back in the day called This Is Your Life. Now,
Yeah.
I didn't know it, but some people might know that show. And back then in the show, I think the audience would be a live audience. And I think Groucho Marx was the host, but they would present a little story, and they'd start with a baby picture, and then they would talk about how an individual did this, that, and the other thing. They wouldn't say the person's name, and then there was a big reveal at the end. And that's how they used to surprise people, probably for the first 20 years, probably till they changed the name in 81 to the Distinguished Service Award. And it was great. It was very touching. And it was a big secret. So you know, the spouse or family members of the recipient would secretly send in photos and tell stories. And that's been replaced now. Basically, the presenter has that responsibility to try to get that backstory for the audience. But it's no longer a surprise. They really wanted to get the recipient a chance. They were really surprised. I mean, unlike the Academy Awards where there's 4 or 5 nominees and they have an understanding they might win an award and they have a chance to prepare something, this was totally a shocker. So in order to give the recipient a chance to sound a little bit more eloquent and less dumbfounded and less emotional, we started surprising the honoree before the convention with a private ceremony, so they would still be surprised, but they had enough time to prepare some awards when they accepted the award. So that's basically the evolution of the awards ceremony for the Distinguished Service Award and how it differs from some of our other awards like the honorary membership and the President's Award.
Thanks, LJ.
No problem.
I actually did not know that we had somebody that won it twice. That was news to me. So that's
William C.
neat.
Sturgeon.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. And I'm going to stick with you for a minute, LJ, before I let you off the hook here. So how does your industry experience, kind of correlate with NAEC, or how do you feel that NAEC and or the industry, and you just touched on a little bit as it relates to the Sturgeon Award, but how do you think it's kind of changed or evolved, past, present, future?
Okay. Well, I mean, just go off on a tangent for a second, just thought of something because I remember hearing the stories, and back when William C. Sturgeon originally sold Mobile Elevator, there was a lot of consolidation in the industry. And back then it was the OEMs purchasing what used to be dealer networks, right? And back then, there was a big debate. I remember my father and Bill used to debate about whether the industry is going to change, where it's going to all get consolidated, and there's going to be no more independence. And Bill was thinking, you might remember, Ricia, you could verify this, that no, it's never going to go back. And my father was saying, no, these guys have been competing against the OEMs for years. They'll go out on their own. It'll always be a startup of a new independent companies. And basically, we've seen the industry change from that consolidation to venture capital at one time, and then private equity, but you still see that entrepreneurial spirit still continuing. So now, as it relates to NAEC specifically, the NAEC has changed tremendously. If we think about how NAEC was started, when Bill and his peers started it many, 75 years ago, basically they were a group of independents. They wanted to get together to create some sort of like united front against the majors. Back then, the majors were Otis and Westinghouse. So Westinghouse became Schindler, for some of the younger members of the association might not know that. You were either a rotary lift dealer, rotary lift for hydros. Rotary lift invented the hydraulic piston to service cars. You go to see a car being serviced, we put it up on a piston. Rotary lift later became Dover, and Dover became Thyssen, as you all know now. Or you were traction, you were using Montgomery. And it's ironic because they formed this group to compete with the majors, and eventually what started out as rotary lift and Montgomery elevator eventually became two OEMs, Dover, then Thyssen, and then of course Montgomery, then Kone. But anyway, the contractor members, they got together and they were from different territories. They didn't really compete with one another, but they had common interests, and it was really how to remain independent and how to compete with an OEM. So, a major, an OEM has the ability to manufacture. They make their own equipment, they install and maintain it. Whereas the independents rely on a supplier network to buy their materials, and then they install and maintain them. So they did invite supplier members, basically to help support their cause against the OEMs. And we've grown quite a bit. A lot of people think of the NAEC because we have a big trade show every year. They think, oh, it's a trade show organization, but in the beginning, it really wasn't. They were talking about different topics and how to survive against the OEMs, and the suppliers were helping with that. But in the beginning, we didn't even have trade shows. We didn't even have tabletop shows. In the beginning, wherever the convention was being held, the suppliers would get the suites at the hotel, but at least the big hotel room, and you would go from room to room and to go see the displays. What the suppliers would bring in. My father set up a cab in his hotel room, and fixture companies would set up their thing, what have you. And of course, it'd be open bar back in those days, right? And you would go from room to room, usually starting at the top floor, taking the stairs, going down to see as many suppliers' rooms as you could. And that's how we got a reputation of being quite a big drinking crowd in the elevator industry. And matter of fact, the term dregs, many people don't know, the dregs came up at the end of the convention.
Right.
We all had a little bit of booze left in our hotel suites.
A lot of booze.
We'd bring it all together. That was the dregs, and we would use it and have one last party to use up the dregs part stuff. So anyway, from then we weren't a professional organization back then in the sense that we had professional staff. We did hire one executive director. Before it was all volunteer. The supplier convention member would the member of the board that was the supplier member that was helping run the convention really did everything for the convention. Would make the deals with the hotels, make the contracts. We didn't have the professional association and headquarters that we have today, which it's made us such a much better organization. We started with doing large hotel ballrooms with tabletops in the beginning, and then slowly started doing displays. And then over time, as we hired more people at headquarters and started to do things more professionally, we've grown into what we have now as a big trade show. But beyond that, the association in the last 10 years has dramatically changed, 10 years. We're now more of an education association. We're not relying on one revenue stream of a convention. We got the CET, the CAT, the QEI, BTMP. It's amazing how far the organization has come, much more financially stable, also not relying on only one revenue source like the convention, but we provide many services from insurance and educational products. and we service, I think the suppliers and the contractors all get quite a bit, and the associate members get all so much out of the association now, because we do have a professional staff running things back at headquarters, and we've really matured into a real full association. That's my memory of the history growing up in the business.
No, LJ, I think that was phenomenal. Thank you. I mean, we've spent a lot of time together, and I've heard some of those stories over the years, but I think it's great to share them, with a larger audience. Obviously you've got so much history with the association that I think it's great to retell some of that.
We were going when we were kids. My sister and I, we were little kids going to the shows because that was our vacation. So we grew up in it.
Mhm.
Mr. Boelhouwer, thanks for joining us today. I know you're slightly under the weather, and we appreciate you kind of sticking through this with us. Wanted to come to you and just talk to you a little bit about, how NAEC has helped you, whether it's, personally, professionally, your company, your career, anything you want to potentially cover on that topic.
Wow. Okay. Well, first off, John, thank you for being the MC this afternoon. Appreciate it, and thanks to the NAEC for providing these great forums for education. I'm certainly honored to be with these other great speakers here today, who I met exclusively through the NAEC. I can say that, but for the NAEC, I would never have met anybody. In fact, that goes for most of the people on this call today. I see a lot of familiar faces, and but for the NAEC and the convention and the education that's happening, I never would have ever have had the context and the breadth of experience I've been allowed to have. I've been sort of lucky in my career. I've worked for big companies. I've worked for small companies. I've worked for service companies, for component manufacturers. I've worked in the United States. I've worked abroad, worked for union. I've worked for non-union. And I would say in each and every one of those contexts, the NAEC proved to be and has been a very valuable partner in our businesses and in my personal development. When I first started out with Otis Elevator, I always refer to the NAEC conferences as my happy hunting grounds because I got a chance to meet all the other independents. And as I was acquiring elevator companies, it was a great place to meet people. As I got more mature and I realized how much I didn't know about elevators and the elevator trade, I took advantage of a lot of the educational opportunities afforded by the NAEC, the networking, the ability to make friends. Some of my best friends in life now I've made through the NAEC. My ride has not been as long as Ricia's. I've only been roughly around for half of the ride of the NAEC so far. But even saying that sort of astounds me that coming out of school, I would have spent my entire career in elevators. So, the trade show always was sort of the starting point for me. And then it sort of evolved into the education and the friendship and the networking. I always used to say that the most important parts of the convention were the opening night and the dregs night, to LJ's earlier point, because that's where the real passionate people were. They were there at the beginning and they were there at the end. And those were 4 or 5 full days in the time. So, even with our current company, American Elevator Group, we are very beholden to the NAEC and its give and take relationship. The CET program, a lot of the educational programs that the NAEC is continually evolving and working on provide invaluable assistance to our company. The CET for, the merit shop side of the house, one of the things I was proud about being able to push through in my tenure as president, I think has been a real plus for the industry, along with several of the other projects we have. We got great things going. We got, Women in Motion, the Next Gen, all types of different programs for people younger in their career or in mid-career or older career. So I'm extremely grateful to the NEC, provided me with a whole world I didn't know existed before. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mark. And just a reminder to the crowd, as we go through this, if you guys have any specific questions for any of the panelists, feel free to shoot them in the chat or raise your hand and we'll come to you as we're going. pivot over to Mr. Ryan. Mike, good afternoon. Thanks for
Afternoon.
joining us. As we kind of mentioned in your bio, you've been involved in a lot of different things in the industry over your career. And I'm just curious if there's any particular projects that you've been personally involved with. Could be Peelle related, NAEC related, that you feel has had the most positive impact on you or on the industry. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Oh yeah, lots of things. First of all, thanks for NAEC for putting this together and putting the panel together. Projects, I would say anytime I was asked by any of the associations that we're members of, we always said yes, and I say we, Peelle, but me personally, because by doing these projects and whatever it might be, I was on the exhibit advisory committee for NAEC, and I was membership chair in SICA. When you get involved with a group of people that you may or may not know, and even if you know them, you don't know them in the context of that new group. And then if you're asked to participate in one of the association's meetings or projects, it just opens you up to another aspect of the association you did not know existed, working with people that you may know but not in that context. And then you work toward that end goal. And as much as the organization appreciated the assistance on that committee or that project, I always said that I got more out of it than NAEC or SICA or NEI or IAEC ever got out of me. I always got more out of them by participating. NAEC, to see where the shows were and where they are today, and I was around through most of that transition. It's just hard to imagine that we went from, sometimes what looked like the basement of a hotel where everybody had a 10 by 10 booth. Ricia smirking because she remembers, and LJ shaking his head. It looks like they put us in the bowels of some of these hotels where everybody. I remember one show I was next to GAL and everybody had a 10 by 10 booth. That's just the way it was. And then we had that first World Expo in Boston, and it never went back. We just had these big booths and running elevators. So yeah, to answer your question, I think any project I got involved with, it was important for the association, but it was probably more important for me because it got me to meet more people and to have some sort of impact in what was going on.
It's so interesting to hear you and LJ and as you talk about the history. I think I've been involved with NAEC for 20 years or approximately or something, and it is hard to imagine how it was at one point, because that was even slightly before my time. So when I hear you and LJ tell some of these stories about how it was not that long ago.
No.
It is extremely interesting to see how we've kind of evolved, right? And as we're tying it into the 75th anniversary of NAEC, I wonder if the founders, would have ever predicted that we would kind of get to where we are today, right? That's pretty interesting to think about. And
on that 10 foot by 10 foot, Mike, I got a funny story, quick one. It's before my time. This is my father's story. But when he was supplier chair and he was running the convention in Washington, D.C., and Hubert Humphrey was vice president, they were in the Ambassador Hotel and they got pushed out. NAEC got pushed out at the last minute. And we had to move everybody's booth. And everybody had to get 8'6" by 8'6" booths because we couldn't fit a 10 foot by 10 foot booth in the new ballroom they put us in. So anyway, you probably remember that, Ricia, right?
Yeah.
We had to move the entire convention in one day or something like that. It was terrible, but everybody had to squeeze into 8'6" by 8'6".
Hey, John, I want to go back to something that LJ said before, which I don't think people are aware. Way back and not that far back, the local elevator contractor in whatever city that we were in they were the host. They did all the work, not like the NAEC staff does today. So
Correct.
they picked the place and the menus, and they also were responsible for either a pre or a post event. I remembered, I think we were in, I want to say San Francisco, was in probably Imperial Elevator. And I think they picked they did a side trip to like Hong Kong after that show. But that was an awful lot of responsibility on the local elevator contractor who's running their business, who's now the host, did all the speaking, set up the hotel, made sure everything went well, and then had to take some sort of people on some junket probably after the show, because it was, like LJ said, a lot of elevator contractors. This was their vacation.
It was. Yeah, they did Alaska after a show. They did,
Oh,
they did a lot
yeah.
of things. There's a lot of things. It was all done without the help of a headquarters, a professional. Now we're in much better shape, thank goodness.
And it's not sustainable. I mean, you couldn't do that. You couldn't just have, you couldn't do it that way today, but
We were a lot
back then
smaller
it was.
organization then. We were a lot smaller.
Yeah, yeah.
Mike, you said something else that I think is just important, or I think it's important just to highlight, which is for anybody who's looking to get involved. You said, for all of your involvement in all the number of different projects, organizations, what have you, not just with NAEC, but industry at large, that you've gotten way more than you feel like you've given. And I think that is so true in my own personal experience. So, and I'm sure that most of the panelists would probably agree as it relates to some of what they've done as well. So I think it's so true. If there is anybody that's, kind of here with us today or watching this, later on after it's posted online, I could not recommend just get involved, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just get started, join a committee, and see, where it takes you. I think that's really was a really powerful statement that kind of made a lot of sense to me.
John, I remember early on, like 92, I think was my first convention. Perhaps even your father-in-law, Rick Kennedy, came up to me and told me to get involved. I really didn't know what that meant, right? What does it mean to get involved, right? But it turns out, and this may be true of a lot of other industries, I only know this one, that elevator people are very willing to share information with you. It's always been a surprise to me how well competitors get along, how we're all interested in a common topic and a common good. And I think if you just find a couple of people or suppliers or contractors and you sit in on a meeting with them, you get to know them, it'll lead you to discover things that you're interested in, places where you can add value and receive value. So I think just being present is a great place to start with being involved. So for what it's worth.
And Mark, where else or what other industry? I mean, certainly not many, where you can sit in a room with competitors who are still your friends, who you're still willing to help each other. I mean, there aren't too many industries like this one, I would imagine, where we can have that shared experience, right? I mean, it's pretty interesting.
Well said.
I have a question that came in, and I'm going to ask this to the panel since it's not directed to any one individual. NAEC was originally started for independence. OEMs later have been welcomed as contractors and/or vendors. And this is now more of an industry association as opposed to where it started as a contractors association. Wondering thoughts on that is what came in from the audience. And that's to any one individual.
Well, I can start with just a piece of that, right? The transition from sort of the contractor base to being an industry, I think it's better left to Ricia and LJ maybe and Mike. But, I think around 2010, 2014, my tenure on the board, we realized that it was sort of an us them always, right? I don't think any OEMs went to, or as I prefer to call them, foreign multinationals, as you know, John, the NAEC events. But we realized we had an awful lot in common, starting with education and licensing, and the model elevator laws that were being pushed in all of the states, code changes, technical data, and I think there began a period of outreach between the NAEC and NEI and other organizations that focused on, hey, what do we share in common in this industry? We all care passionately about the elevators and the safety of the riding public and education, and can we capitalize on that? So in my past decade, I think that's been a big plus for all of us. How we evolved to that before that, I don't know. I don't know. Should I turn over to you, Ricia? Would you be able to answer that?
I'm sorry, did you ask me?
No, I'm just curious. Maybe LJ or you would know, when the first impetus to become less of a independent service contractor to a industry became.
I would guess it would have been more into the 80s.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting because I'm working on doing the NAEC history right now for the convention. And so I haven't quite gotten to that point, but I think it's one of the things that NAEC participated in was the bridge builders that sort of brought associations together, even international ones. And it was kind of, the reason for it was so that these associations weren't reinventing the wheel individually without talking to each other. And it was a good thing to happen. I think the first person that led the group was Bob Jacobs, and he had been president of both NEI and NAEC. So he kind of had a pan industry feeling, and he felt it was really important to build bridges between the associations and to use what each one was best at.
Right. Yeah, but I think we're gonna, what happened though over time, even though we've opened up, it's more on the supplier side, Mark, too, the like Kone Spares or Otis's Unitech, they're supplier members and they sell to the independents, so they do participate in the shows and things like that. But the fact that this was started for the independent contractor, and there's other associations, NEI has their thing for the OEMs, and NAEC is for safety, and we have code committees, and we have the IAEC, for consultants. But this industry in particular, there's some services that we provide to independents. One time, I don't know if you remember TR Paul, we used to buy our medical insurance. You can get your medical insurance from the NAEC. There was a lot of things we could do to different things that maybe some members, like an OEM, might not require, or multinational, if we want to use Mark's term. So being a member, they might not want to pay for those services. So different industries evolve to provide different services for the different memberships. Doesn't mean we're at war with one another. Like we said, with these bridge builders, we are working the same direction. We work on code committees together. We work in safety things together. Fundraising efforts as well for elevator safety foundation, things like that. But this industry was specifically started, if you look at the charter, to help this association, excuse me, to help the independent contractor. And we've merged over time and we work together over time, but still independently, that's its main support.
John, I would suspect that the contractors, and it's a contractor association, I would guess things turned in a positive direction when they started to rely more on suppliers for information, training. Hey, we have got this kind of a situation. Can you make a product? Do you have a fix? Do you have a service? And then, education applies to all of us. LJ said it about the safety foundation. That's a thing that affects all of us. Moving the elevator industry forward affects all of us. So, yeah, it's a contractor association, still is a contractor association, but I think it's sort of morphed where more people were recognized for their talents when the contractors recognized those talents were needed, to operate their business more efficiently.
I want to pivot for a second or two just to talk about, I think, Mark, it was you who mentioned a few of the different, groups that we have, kind of up and coming groups or more than up and coming, well-established groups in NAEC, Women in Motion, Next Gen in particular. Having being a part of that first Next Gen group, which, was maybe 15 or 20 of us, to see where it's gotten today, where it's in excess of 100 sometimes is pretty remarkable. So Mike, I want to come back to you for a second. Just curious what advice you might give someone that's about to enter the industry. And if applicable, is there anything that they should ignore?
I wouldn't ignore any opportunity. I mentioned it before. I think if there's a group that appeals to you, whether it's Women in Motion, whether it's Next Gen, whether it's joining an NAEC committee on education or getting involved with the trade show, I think if you've got talent, I think you should exploit it, and I think you should contribute. Like I said, I got way more out of any group or project that I was on than they got from me. So if you're a young person getting into the industry, I would not be afraid to get involved. I would go to the trade shows. I would go to the meetings. And, one of the things that took me, admittedly, I should have done it sooner, was to engage more people at some of the social functions. I mean, it's a very intimidating crowd, right? You walk into any of the functions that we have, everybody knows everybody. They're really having a good time. And if you're brand new, it's like, wow, it really can be kind of scary. But, we're also very inviting, right? We'll introduce you. We'll drag you around. I mean, that is, I think, the value of having those relationships, that they can put you in touch with some other people. And I think a couple of you guys mentioned on the call before, I don't think anyone looks at a competitor as a competitor. I mean, they're still kind of sort of a friend, and you see them and you got to live with them, and there's plenty of work for all of us. So yeah, I mean, if I can make an introduction for you, I think I would. So that would be my advice. Get involved, join a committee, and try to meet as many people as you possibly can, because it's going to help you. It's going to help your employer.
I'm going to ask this question to Ricia, but I also, after let Ricia talk, if anybody else has any comments on it, because I do think it's incredibly important, not only as it relates to the Next Gen crowd, but for all of us. And it's around mentors. I think I consider all four of you mentors to me at one point in my career. Many people on the call that I see in the crowd, who have helped me along the way. So, Ricia, I'm just kind of curious, maybe what mentors you've had, or ones that you think have helped you the most in the industry, and if there is anything else that you want to expand on as it relates to mentors and mentorship, and then I'll come to anybody else with the same question.
Well, when I came into the industry, I was very young, and as LJ said, we kind of grew up as children. That was our vacation. And but when I started working with Elevator World and had to become part of the industry, I found that there were some people who helped me a lot. One of them was Walt Glazer. He was amazing. He could explain the most complex things on the back of a cocktail napkin. He was really amazing. And so he was definitely a mentor to me. There were Marie McDonald was another one. She was just an incredible woman. And one of the first women in the industry. She made me feel so welcome because there were many times when I felt like I was the only woman around. And so that's certainly not the case today. Another person that was really significant to me was Martha Hogan. She helped start the first women's group in NAEC. And Martha she just never took 1 minute of guff off of anybody. She was always exactly who she was. And so I think about her all the time. But I will say one thing. When my son first decided to come into the company, I admit that it made me very nervous because I had been working with my father for many, many years. And I knew that it was not easy, that family businesses can be, difficult because you still go home with those people. And it's still your father and your boss. So I had dinner with Walt Glazer, and I said, it really worries me because I feel like my father made some mistakes in working with me, and I just am afraid I'll make some of those mistakes in working with my son. He said, "Oh no, you'll make a whole new batch of mistakes." It will. And he was right. But it's part of, he had a lot of grasp of what it's like working in a family business. And even though I'm in the publishing business and y'all are in the elevator business, I still grew up in a family business. So it's it's just a different animal than working for Otis or one of the big guys. It's not the same.
It's funny. I'm smirking for a number of reasons, but because I can relate to a lot of those points, working in a family business.
Yes.
But I'm also chuckling because I'm remembering the first time that I met Walter, and it ties into what you were suggesting, Mike. The first time I met him was just at a random bar at a convention, and it can be very, very intimidating. And, this is the guy, right? And he couldn't have been nicer and more welcoming and all the things that you mentioned. So it's just interesting. That's what it brought me back to a place there for a minute. So very interesting. Mike or LJ, Mark, I don't know if anybody wants to touch on that at all a little bit, or
Mentors?
on the mentor.
Yeah, I looked at I want to say the word senior, but I don't want to say that now because I'm sort of in that age group now. But when I started, I was really early 20s. But you look at some of these guys that you know, Walter and Herb, right? Who would imagine that those guys would be so approachable? LJ's dad, right? Lou, and what Lou, how he built that business, but how he used to manage his time, and he would speak up at meetings. And you watch those folks and you're like, wow, these guys have been here a long time, and this is what's on their mind. Marv Schumacher, my boss at the time, Joe Sproul, who was a senior guy, but around for, I mean, he worked at Peelle for over 50 years. You know, when you look at mentors, I looked at the senior guys, whether they own their own company or work for somebody, like how they managed their job and their business and their people. And that's kind of sort of the person I've morphed into. I don't think it's a bad thing, but you know, it was super important to be able to look up to those guys and say, okay, they know their stuff and they're having some fun, and they're regular guys, and they're setting up the booth and tearing the booth down and working a bar at night. You know, and you know, because when you're brand new, you don't know how to be, and you don't know when anyone's expecting you to be. But then you watch these senior folks, male and female now. And it was super important because, you know, I didn't know how to model my behavior.
Yeah.
It's really funny, Mike. You know, I've said it slightly differently, but sometimes I've joked that you know, I feel like a fraud because all I did throughout my entire career was exactly what you just said. I saw somebody and I liked the way that they did that thing, and I just tried to make it my own. And I just kept doing that throughout my career, right? And to using your language, you know, it kind of morphs you into the individual. And I think that's, you know, just something that's really, really cool. It's something that I've always did. And I think that's something that younger folks can do, whether you're a manager in an organization or whether you're a technician. You know, a lot of different ways to put up rails or do this. And if you pick out which, you know, way you like and make it your own, you can really better yourself. So that was really, really well said.
Yeah.
Mr. Boelhouwer, I'm going to come to you. This is not my question. I stole this question from Tim Ferriss, the author, but I liked it so much, I'm going to ask it of you. So I'm just curious, in the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life? Now, that can be personally, professionally, any which way, shape, or form.
Hard to limit it to just one, as there's so many ways I could probably improve. But you know, I think it's a bit of a cliche. A lot of these cliches, as you get older, turn out to have a lot of kernel of truth in them. And I would say, you know, over the last 7-10 years, you know, between my time at Vantage and my time in AEG, I've become very fond of believing and saying, you know, if you're going to come to work every day, play to win, right? And that sounds like just a truism, right? What do you mean by that? But all of you on this phone in the elevator business know that at any given time, there are so many priorities and so many initiatives and so many things you're trying to work on simultaneously. And that you think that if you keep adding to your list of things that I'm going to tackle and I'm going to fix, that's a great way to go about it. But what I've kind of realized is that list will never end. There's always going to be ways to improve, continuous improvement, all of these other cliches. And tied up in all of that are things like you get what you measure. The best way to get things done is to do them. So I say play to win. And what I really mean by that is identify the no more than 5 top things. Sit down one day, write down what you're doing and versus a list of what you should be doing, and come up with the 5 things that you should be doing, and make that happen, right? Don't do things sort of half-ass or half-heartedly. Pick those 5 initiatives you're going to do and focus in on them and make the time for them, and really put your money where your mouth is, and prioritize those things. Because, you know, John, and you and several of my colleagues on or along for this ride, you know, you wake up and all of a sudden you're a very large company with a lot of different needs and things to take care of. and it's easy to get distracted and put in a lot of different ways. So I think whatever your company size is, hey, you know, if you want to be the biggest in your town or the best service provider or install the most elevators or I don't know, sell the most freight elevators or elevator doors and or magazines or whatever it is we all do for a living. You know, find those things that are going to make it work and prioritize those. I guess that's my one moment of clarity there, John.
Thanks for that, Mark. I appreciate it. And again, thanks for I know you're struggling there. You're doing a good job. Thanks for sticking with it as we go. Off the wall question. So I'm gonna ask it to all four of you because I don't want to put any one individual on the spot with this one. And I'm just curious. So if you guys could have a gigantic billboard anywhere in the world, and it could say anything on it, what would that say? What would it say? For fear of having a bunch of stale air here.
Make it count.
Right.
That's good.
The harder I work, the luckier I get. I think Sam Goodwin, what's MGM Studios, Goodwin used to say that. Newt Rockney, I think, gets credited with that. So it's not luck. You got to put the time in, like Mark said, figure out what the most important things are and work on those things. The things happen, but the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Right.
I have a few more questions here. We have about a little over 17 minutes or so left. Just want to remind everybody in the crowd, if you guys have any questions you want to ask of the esteemed panel here, please feel free to type them or just raise your hand and we'll call on you. And I'm just going to stick with the whole group here, not necessarily any one individual if somebody wants to tackle this one. Oftentimes, and we hear it a lot, but oftentimes, you know, the way we learn is by failing. And it's a really scary thing, especially as you're growing in your career. You know, and it's kind of around that theme of not being afraid to fail. So I guess the question is, do any of you have a failure or apparent failure that has later set you up for success? Or do you have a favorite failure? I finally got them. I've been trying hard.
I like that expression, favorite failure.
While you guys are thinking about that, I'll ask you another one, and just to give you guys a little bit more time to think about it, and maybe prime you with one last thing, and that's just what is the best or most worthwhile investment you've ever made? Now that could be time, that could be money, that could be energy. You know, we talked a lot about the investment in NAEC and you know, the industry. Does anybody have a best or most worthwhile investment that you've made?
I do. I think becoming involved in NAEC's CET program was, in the beginning, just terrifying. I think there were so many people that thought it just couldn't be done. So it was pretty scary, but it's also, I think, for NAEC and for Elevator World, it's been such a worthwhile thing. And in the process, we've learned so much about the industry, about people who are willing to write about the industry, or it just has brought a whole new group of people to the forefront, and that nobody really knew. For me, certainly, being on that committee, I met people that I wouldn't have met any other way. And they became great friends, and great supporters and hard workers. It just, that was probably one of the biggest investments of time that I made, and that all those people on that committee made, that went on for years, really. It started in 2020, and we signed the first contract on 9/11, and started publishing books. But it was like 5 years
2000.
before we finished.
Yeah, it took forever. It was a great investment.
Yeah.
And all the programs, you were involved with all of them. I was involved with writing one chapter, but even what you just did, John, with the QEI, the people don't realize the amount of work that goes into it. So those are great investments. It takes a lot of time, a lot of suffering, but when we're all said and done, it's very valuable resource, and you can use it over and over and over, and you can share it. It's very, very good investment.
Hey, John, I have a favorite failure.
Let's go. Hit me with it.
Took me a while. Yeah. So my favorite failure was I was sent out super young making sales calls. I mean, so young that I reminded myself the other day that I was so young making sales calls that they had to rent me a car because I wasn't old enough to rent a car yet. So somebody had to rent me a car. I think it was Sproul actually had to go and rent me a car because I wasn't. I think I was 22. So I don't think at the time you couldn't rent a car until you were 25. But anyway, my favorite failure was I didn't realize that so much of what we do is based on relationships that, as a young salesperson, I would go out and sell, which is what I thought you needed to do. But I didn't get to know the person. I didn't get to know their business. I didn't get to know anything fun about them. I didn't get to know what makes them tick, right? I would just go in and do my thing and leave. And then it took years until I figured out that it would be way more fun to get to know this person and then kind of sort of mention that, oh, I'm here to sell you something. But, I make a sales call today. I might not even mention what we do or what's available because I don't need to, right? I have the relationship, right? They know who I am. They know who I'm working for. They know what we got. So sometimes it's just you're kind of catching up with that person because you've built that relationship, and it doesn't necessarily have to always be, 100% business all the time, right? So yeah, that would be my favorite failure. Is I wish I had known as a younger person that you really got to get to know the person a little bit better before you start, with that kind of relationship of selling. Get to know them, get them to know you.
It's probably more true in this industry than most, right? I mean, this industry is so relational. A lot of what we do is based on relationships. It really is so true. And it's funny, and it's something else I stole from somebody because I don't come up with anything on my own. You really do sell more when you stop trying to sell, right?
Yeah.
Like when you just stop selling, you sell more.
Right.
I think it really is, very, very true. And, Ricia, back to your comment about the development of the CET program, I don't think merit shop contractors would have survived through a lot of the legislation that's happened in the industry without having access to that CET program. and while it probably is the hardest working committee, you know, in all of NAEC, even today, I can't imagine what it was like back then. Just it's so worthwhile to the industry as a whole. And it is open to the entire industry as well, right? I mean, I know more merit shop contractors use it, but it's so important to really just the ability to even be in business today. So I you know, that really resonated with me, and I can only imagine how much of a Herculean effort it must have seemed at the time. But getting back to what Mark said, you know, I think he said something like easiest way to get started is to start, or something like that, right? I mean, it's just to get going. So
Mainly
yeah.
it was Bobby Schaefer
Bobby Schaefer, yeah.
who just, you know, said, we can do this. And it was pretty amazing because he kept telling me that we could do it. And he had to do a lot of convincing, but I admire him a lot for his contributions to education. He was very strong on that.
Well said. We have a few more minutes. If anyone else in the audience has anything that they'd like to ask the panel, in the absence of no other questions, we could end a few minutes early, but I'll just give it a minute or so to see if anything else comes in from the panel. You can type it in the chat or hit the reactions button, raise your hand if there's anything that you want to ask of these folks. Otherwise, you know, out of respect for everybody's time, we'll try to make sure that we end on time or a few minutes early here. Certainly want to thank the four panelists for, you know, their time and energy, willingness to join us today. Thank you very much. Thank everyone in the audience who took the time out of their day to join us here, to see us live and in person. And of course, I think we're seeing just as many people who are watching this after the fact on demand. So thanks to everybody who's always taken the time to review these. Thanks to everybody for attending, and you know, we hope that we will see you guys in September. Take care all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Guys.
Bye-bye.